This is part 2 of To Judge is to Fear. I mentioned in the previous video that when we judge others and believe they deserve punishment, attack, that they're guilty, they deserve condemnation, etc., that we also subconsciously believe that about ourselves. And that leads to this fear of God, fear of truth, fear of awakening, fear of following guidance, etc. In this snippet, what I'm going to share is an experience I had where I faced this fear directly. And of course, I'll describe it as best I can. But when I listen to the description, it's not like the actual experience itself. One of the things I want to say about this is that all fear, regardless of what the fear is, really stems from this fear of love, fear of God, fear of condemnation, fear of sacrifice, uh, fear of being destroyed, right? Everything stems from this fear, which actually comes from our judgment of others, as well as our judgment of ourselves. So all fear comes from this. It's possible that you will never face the fear metaphysically as I did, as I am describing in this audio. And if you do face it metaphysically, it may be a completely different experience than the one that I had. So, don't expect to go through the same experience, but just realize that all fear comes from this fear. And if you look at any fear very carefully, you will find this fear at its root. And after this, I'll go ahead and make another video with another snippet, which I'll call How to Let Go of the Fear. Because on the day that I taught this, people were asking, well, what do you do when the fear comes? So I'll make another snippet next with the answer to that question. But for now, let's listen to my experience of when I faced this subconscious fear and what that experience was like for me. All right, then, let's continue with the third law of chaos. My question was, what would you have me realize from the third law of chaos? And that law is, God must accept his son's belief in what he is and hate him for it. So here's the answer. This is the law that makes yourself, and this is self with a capital S, this is the law that makes yourself your enemy and makes it impossible to trust yourself, again with a capital S. For here, you fear your own power, afraid that you will use it to punish and destroy yourself. And so you believe it is safer to deny your power, which is to deny yourself and make yourself little and without hope. In this, you become a victim of the world outside of you, one who has good days and bad days, but who cannot influence those days himself. Again, this is very, very, very close to some things that I've been feeling recently. In fact, I can feel my heart beating a little bit. Actually, this experience was a couple months ago. It wasn't real recent, but it was such a strong experience, and this paragraph is bringing it back to my mind. Some of you may have heard this story before, but earlier in the summer, I had 2 fear of love experiences, very strong fear of love experiences, and they were different. I think the first fear of love experience was a stepping stone to the second fear of love experience. What happened in the first fear of love experience is when I got really deep into the fear, what I saw in the mind as a belief was the thought, which I had just described to you above, the thought that if I went to God, if I truly laid down all of my defenses, truly surrendered and went to God, that God would turn me away. God would say, not you. And I would be permanently cut off from God. And that would be pure hell. In fact, I saw during this fear experience that this is probably where the idea of hell came from. It was a very strong fear, very strong fear. But then about a week later, I had another fear of love experience that was worse. It was worse. in the first fear of love experience, there was still an other. There was a God who could reject me. In the second fear of love experience, there was no other. There was only self. And when I was very deep into the fear, what I saw very, very clearly was that there was the belief in the mind that if I was to move forward and look at everything that was in the mind that Holy Spirit is guiding me to look at and let go of, specifically look at unworthiness, self-hatred in the mind, that if I was to move forward and do that, that what would happen is that I would have to face things about myself, not thoughts in the mind, but true things about myself. This is how the ego talks. True unworthiness that is so strong that I would not be able to bear it. And what would happen is that I would reject myself. And the I that is rejecting myself in this fear is not Regina rejecting herself. This was the Son of God, or you might even want to say God. This was this very, very powerful creature turning on itself. And this was the big fear, that when self turned on self, that would be the ultimate hell. That would be the absolute ultimate hell, when all of that power was completely turned on self in a negative, attacking, and really the word that comes to mind is devouring way. Self-devouring self. That is a very, very, very real fear within our own mind. And most of us are not at all in touch with that fear. But we truly do fear ourself and fear our own power. And we will continue to fear ourself and fear our own power as long as we believe that we and our brothers are not deserving of love, are instead deserving of attack and death, which was that first law of chaos. So when we get to the third law of chaos, where we believe that God must accept his Son's belief in what he is, which is not deserving, and hate him for it because he's not deserving, because he's truly, truly, truly unworthy. When we get to that third law of chaos, that's when this fear of ourself arises. And this fear of ourself is so strong, it's so strong, even though it's not in most of our conscious minds. It's in mine now, which is why my heart's beating. Most of us are not at all consciously aware of this fear. But this fear is so strong that this is why we choose to make ourselves little. You know,